hiking the most hostile place on planet Earth, why renewable energy matters, and a riveting dialogue with eco-explorer Robert Swan and Commvault CMO Chris Powell from a satellite phone 30 miles from the South Pole. All right. Joey Ramone said, hey ho, let's go. And holy moly, are we gonna go? Hello, my legendary friends. This is Christopher Lochhead, your host on Legends and Losers. And man, am I ever glad you're here. This is a remarkable episode of Legends and Losers. And I'm gonna argue it's one of the most remarkable podcasts you can imagine. And the reason for that is simple. We have two mind-blowing guests, Robert Swan and Chris Powell, and the conversation we have is via satellite phone from their campsite 30 miles from the South Pole. Now, I'll give you some more on that in a second. I wanted to lead off by a quote with a quote from John Muir, who said, quote, "In every walk with nature, one receives far more than he seeks." And I don't know about you. I've tried to spend a reasonable amount of time in my life in the backcountry, hiking, skiing, exploring, going on, exploration, surf trips and hiking trips and the like. And so, I'm a weekend warrior class adventurer, if you will. And so the thrill it was to talk to Robert and Chris from their campsite is just incredible. So on this episode, we check in with the two of them on the first ever South Pole expedition that is 100% powered by renewable energy. This expedition started on November 15th, 2017. It is a 600-mile, 8-week journey on foot. And these explorers and adventurers drag a sled that has about 100 pounds of their gear on it. And they get as high up as 10,000 feet as they make their way to the South Pole. And that's where we check in with them. Now, Chris Powell, why are they doing this? Essentially, they're doing this to raise awareness for global climate change and the use of renewable energy. Both Chris and Robert have an extreme commitment to making a difference in our world and in our environment. Chris is the chief marketing officer of publicly traded $2.5 billion market cap Commvault. And Commvault is a sponsor of the expedition. He's been a technology executive for over 20 years. He spent about 15 years with SAP, and he is an avid athlete, triathlete, runner, and kayaker. With him on this call is none other than the legendary extreme adventure explorer, Robert Swan. And Robert is the first person ever to hike both the North and the South Pole. In 1986, Robert and his team of two other guys completed a 70-day, 900-mile journey to the South Pole, which was the longest unaided hike in history at the time. 3 years later, he walked with a team of 700 miles to the North Pole, becoming what he says, quote, it was, quote, the first person stupid enough to walk both poles. He has a TED Talk out there that's been viewed over 1 million times, and he's the founder of 2041.com, an organization dedicated to preserving Antarctica. He is a United Nations Goodwill Ambassador, a visiting professor of the School of Environment at Leeds University, and in 1994, he became a special envoy to the director of UNESCO, which is the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. Here they are, Chris Powell and Robert Swan, 30 miles from the South Pole.
Well, where we are is in the most hostile place on Earth, there's no question. We're on what's called the Polar Plateau, which is an area about the size of the United States of America, and it is at an altitude of 10,000 feet above sea level. It is without doubt the coldest place on Earth. Today, we've got good weather. It's about -20. If you go out into the wind, You've got more wind chill factor, and we're very, very, very isolated. We really are in 360 degrees of nothing, of just white ice, and beneath where Chris and I are sitting now is 16,000 feet of solid ice. 90% of the world's ice is here. 70% of the world's fresh water is, we're sitting on it. And we are delighted to speak to civilization. We've had a very hard time in the last few days, but we've pulled through, and we are 30 nautical miles from the South Geographic Pole itself. 30 nautical miles, which does not sound very much, but that is going to mean 4 days of 8 hours of pulling our sledges. 4 days of 8 hours will bring us to the pole itself, after more struggle outside. So it's very exciting, and I'm delighted to be here with Chris, because Commvault have been a huge support to our expedition. They've been absolutely fantastic.
And Robert, I know you've been on these expeditions before. How do the weather conditions and the overall environment on this trip, how do they compare to your prior trips to the poles?
Well, let me be honest in saying I am the first person in history, and Chris knows this to be true now, the first person in history stupid enough to have walked to both poles. And on my old expeditions, we didn't have communications. We didn't have film. We had old film in our cameras. We didn't have GPS. We didn't have any communications. And what's really changed for us is that we are putting out a huge amount of data. We are recording every day, and it's hard to do it here, whether that be voice, whether that be film. We've made the first 360-degree film, the 360 camera, which has been a battle to use. We've got drone footage, and no one's ever done that before in the history of polar exploration. And what's fantastic for us, and very important for us, is that all of that data we know is safely with Commvault. That's their business. And it would be such a pain in the backside, excuse the language, if we made all this effort to get all this data and we didn't have access to it, and it was lost. And that has happened to us before. It won't happen, and that's why I'm delighted that I'm sitting next to Chris, and we know the data is safe, because just to take one picture here is literally, possibly, you could get frostbite doing it. So all that effort, and our efforts towards inspiring young people on energy, our efforts to inspire young people to preserve Antarctica, the only place in the world that all of us own, we need to have that story to be able to show people. So we're delighted to have this association with Chris, and maybe he might be able to speak to you now. He's sitting right next to me. If you saw how many clothes we were wearing and we're inside the tent, you'd know how cold it is. So I'll put you over to Chris Powell. There he is.
Thanks, Robert.
Hi,
How are you,
Christopher. This
Chris?
is Chris Powell.
How are you,
Very
Chris?
good.
Uh, and
Doing
my
very good.
understand,
Can you hear?
I can hear you beautifully, perfectly. My understanding is this is the first time you've been on a trip like this. How is it for you as a first timer?
It's pretty extraordinary, I have to tell you. I was just telling Robert that I thought he was trying to scare me before the trip into making sure I was in good enough shape, but this is very hardcore. It's certainly, in the words that we've been using, it's a remarkable journey that Barney and team and the spec team have done over the last, I think it's 51 days as of today. And just here doing it for what will probably amount to be about 8 to 10 days out here, and the last 10% with them is just truly amazing. This is hard. It's hard.
Tell me about the sleds that you guys are pulling.
So the sled is made. I guess it's Kevlar, and it has two skids on the bottom. And I would say, how much do you think they weigh, Robert? About when we started,
probably about £100 by the time we.
yeah, about 100 pounds by the time everything was all in them. So each day you pack them full of all of your clothing you've brought, your sleeping bag, of course, and all of the food. There's a lot of. It takes probably about 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the night to get all of your things either set up or broken down. The sled is pretty hard to pull. I was pulling a sled in training, and I don't think it compares much to this. It's every step you can feel it behind you, and there's a lot of you sort of picture this landscape as pretty short, or pretty flat. I mean, but there's a lot of bumps along the way, and you're pulling your sled up and over what are minor little hills, but it's not so minor when the sled weighs so much.
And do you guys have backpacks on as well, or is everything in the sled?
Everything's in the sled. We've got everything's in the sled, and then you've got a harness on, and pretty much you're walking in what is surprisingly not that many clothes. You have a lot of layers on. 3 layers of wool on the bottom and on the top, and then a windproof layer. A lot of Gore-Tex going on around the camp, and when you stop for every hour you stop for a 10-minute break, you put on your down layer, and so you don't get cold. You have a drink and food, because we figure we're probably burning somewhere around 8,000 calories a day here as we're going along. So you try not to make it a weight loss regimen as part of this, because that's sort of the worst thing you can do. You need to keep your energy up, and when you're out there pulling along, it definitely drains your energy. So that's a big part of it. As you go, I do some triathlons, nothing all that big, just Olympic level triathlons, and in that you try to keep hydrated and well fed, and this is that to a much higher degree.
Yeah, I can only imagine, gentlemen. I've done a fair amount of backcountry skiing, a lot of it in the Sierras, and hiking and the like. And one of the things I noticed, I'm curious to ask you about this, is when you're out on a multi-day tour, even in the Sierras, you can drop 10 or 15 pounds in 2 or 3 days sometimes. And what I found is very hard to get enough calories in your body, even if you're stopping and taking breaks and eating and so forth. And so
Yeah.
I'm curious, do you guys have a sense for how much you're able to take in calorie wise?
I think we probably figure we've got about a 2,000 calorie a day deficit. We're taking in about 5,000 or 6,000. And that's a lot of the preparation. You probably spend 2-3 hours, maybe even a full half day before you set out when you're at base camp, packing your food, making sure you have the right amount. There's a lot of personal responsibility in a trip like this that you need to everything's laid out in front of you. You're given the right instructions, but then you need to take over and make sure that you're going to be adequately supplied. So yeah, it's hard. And in terms of water supplies, it's an ongoing struggle and job to light the stoves, melt the ice, fill up everybody's canteen. Everybody has 3 liters worth of canteens with them, so you get filled in the morning and then you get filled again at night. During the pull during the day, sometimes you take your hot water and pour it over snow, and you fill one of your canteens with snow and you put hot water over it to get more water. So it's been an interesting learning experience, what you do out here when you look everywhere around you and it's just nothingness, just white and nothingness.
Now, are there abominable snowmen that you guys have met there, or any interesting monsters?
I know. I was looking for monsters. Sometimes in the night you think you hear monsters. There's a lot of sounds and winds and noises, but no, we haven't detected anything as of yet.
And if we could just go back to the sled for a second, so you're strapped to the sled as well, so that if you were to drop it, you're still connected to it. Is that correct?
Are you talking about crevasses?
I'm talking about your sled.
Or, or just if we fall? But if we were to drop where?
Yeah, if you were to fall somehow or trip or something along those lines, you're connected to your sled, are you not?
You're totally connected to the sled the whole time. And where the spec group first started, where Barney and Kyle and Martin went out on, there's a lot of danger along those routes, as you have to avoid the crosses and make sure that they're strapped together even at certain points, so they're strapped to their sleds and to each other. And then once you get to the 89th parallel is when you hit an area that is, as Robert said, it's an extremely harsh environment. The winds kick up. The snow starts to get a consistency like sand, so the sled, even though if it's lighter, it's really dragging and can seem a lot heavier. But it's there's no crevasses once you hit the 89th parallel. It's a pretty solid piece of ice that you're walking along. It's bumpy, but luckily there's nothing for us to fall into. So occasionally someone will fall. It's a little bit embarrassing as you're moving along, but we haven't had too much of that.
And I understand the up sections could be quite challenging because you're dragging the sled. The sled's 100 or so pounds. Did I hear that right?
About 100 pounds, yeah.
And you guys are at 10,000 feet, so the air's pretty light up there.
Yeah, it is pretty. The altitude hit a few people when we first got here. It's definitely one of those things where you get tired out a lot quicker when you're setting up the tents initially and doing some of the work around the camp. You can get tuckered out pretty quickly. And the altitude's at 10,000, but actually because of the curvature of the Earth, it can be as high as 14,000 in terms of the oxygen level is the equivalent. So it's a can be pretty challenging at times, and on and off headaches, and some people have been struggling a little bit, but we're trying to power our way through.
And at this stage, Chris, how many days have you been on the expedition?
Oh, that's a good question. It's amazing how you lose track of time. I got one of those watches that you can tell if it's not a day, but it is. I guess this is the fourth day that we've been out here. Yeah, I guess maybe starting on the fifth. We expect to reach the pole if all goes well on the 15th. So it'll be about somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 days, 9 or 10 days that we'll be walking out here.
How very exciting. And what are you guys learning?
Well, I mean, a lot of this mission is about a number of different things. I think in terms of what we learn, there's all the personal angles of what you learn, but I think what Robert's trying to do, what Barney's doing, what the 2041 Foundation do, is trying to less about what we learn here and more about what we're trying to do to spread the word. Rob has a great way of putting things in terms of there's no one individual that's going to be able to make a difference here. This is a collection of all of us. And this mission and a lot of the work of the 2041 Foundation is about trying to get the message out and get everyone beginning to understand the things they need to do and things they need to learn. It's been a learning experience for me just out here for sure, but it's also been actually a learning experience about things companies can do differently, things individuals can do differently to really be stewards of the planet and to to make sure that for future generations everything is taken care of. And here there couldn't be a better story, right? Rob did this trek on the opposite side of the pole actually 32 years ago, and 32 years ago tonight. So 32 years ago tonight, that occurred, and now we'll just in a few days be reaching and with his son. So it's a multi-generational struggle for the Swans, and it's a multi-generational struggle, I think, for for all of us as we look to just see how we should be doing things differently.
And Robert, what's the message that you hope the world gets from your return to the South Pole?
Well, I think it's Rob Swan again. The message is very simple, that we are the first expedition to survive only on renewable energy, and that has been a mix of energy. It's been solar ice melters made by NASA. It's been Goal Zero batteries that we're still battling to get going, but they're hanging on in there. And Shell have made this amazing biofuel that's made from wood chip and garbage all the way from India. So we're out there really just with one simple thing. People need to think, especially in the great country of the United States, where I'm privileged to live. We've got to think about how we're using our energy, and think of saving energy using renewable, clean technologies, because we need to do that as a world. It's maybe freezing cold here where we are, but as you know, and you've read the news, on the edge of Antarctica, which is all made of ice, a lot of the ice caps there, a good 1,000 miles from where we are now, are starting to break off. We know that climate change is happening, and we need to respond to that challenge. So our effort is to show that corporates, great people like Chris, are committed enough, not only as a human being, to come out and do this and survive on renewable energy, but his company is behind that, and that people like my son, who's 23, has just walked 500 miles through this, so he can inspire his generation. So it's a simple message. What are you doing with your energy? And we've got lots of ideas that people can look at on our website on simple things they can do at a click of a mouse. Sadly, you've got to make things easy for people to do in this world, and that's what we're doing. And we hope that our story, Chris's story, my story, all the team stories combined, can inspire people to say, hey, maybe I could do that. And they do it, and we make those changes. That's the message.
Fantastic, gentlemen. And just to underscore the point, Robert, did we not have fairly recently a major section of the Antarctic sort of fall off, so to speak?
Correct, yes. 15 years ago, we had the huge breakup of what was called the Larsen B ice shelf, and that really started people thinking that climate change was a bit of a reality. That's 15 years ago. And then literally a month ago, the Larsen C ice shelf, a massive piece of ice, broke off from the edge of Antarctica. These have been the things that have inspired us all, Chris, myself, and the team, to be, making the effort. And what's really great about this is that students, we've got to get to young people. Let's be honest. And my son, who's 23, has had. We've all had messages from places like, Muscat. We've had places from Paris, Chicago, from California, from I think Bombay, Calcutta, all over the world. Students have been writing in saying, what can we do? And our response to that is to say, here are some ideas. Our message is not awareness anymore. The inconvenient truth is history. The convenient solutions now is how we must respond. In our own small way, battling out here, we are showing that if we can survive on renewable energy out here, the telephone I'm speaking to you on is charged by a solar panel in the middle of Antarctica. So if we can do that here, why can't people do more of that at home? It's very, very, very simple, and we're honored and pleased that you've taken the trouble to speak to us out here in the loneliest, most hostile place on Earth. So I'll hand you over to Chris to wrap things up. But all the very, very best to you and your team. This is Rob Swan, going clear. Here's Chris.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you so much, and bless you.
Okay, this is Chris again, Chris.
So one of the things that sort of raises in my mind, Chris, is there are still many people in our world, some of them learned people, who don't think that either A, climate change is happening, or B, that humans are affecting climate change. You know, how do you think about that?
Well, I think when we've been looking at this, and there's always controversy over certain things, but I think when we look at this, climate change as an overall thing is not it shouldn't be a political issue. It's not something that there's one side versus another on. I think when we look at this, there certainly can be people that talk about all the different reasons, but at the end of the day, when you talk about efficiency, whether you're a company, a government, or just overall humanity, the proper usage of resources and the most efficient usage of resources is just smart. It's smart business. It's a smarter way to take care of things. So I think we look at it and we try to take away the controversial side. That's why certainly some people could look at the partnership that Robert has with Shell and the biofuel technology they're bringing together and ask why such a partnership would exist. But I think Rob looks at this very practically. There's great companies like Shell that are trying to make a difference and see themselves as energy companies, not as oil and gas necessarily, and see that things can begin to change over time. So the great biofuels that we're using here we're able to utilize. And what I would say to anyone of sort of what we're doing out here and trying to raise awareness is we're trying to be on the right side of history. And as we move forward, I think a lot of what we've been working on, and Rob mentioned the students that we've been hearing from, we probably, from out here in our tents, we've answered about 50 student questions from around the world. They've been sent to us via satellite phone from either a text or an email, and we've been able to go around the group and either respond with voicemail messages or with text and email message replies that get posted on 2041.com. And again, all of this is, I think, trying to prove the point of we're out here in such an incredibly harsh and hostile environment, and if we're able to accomplish these things here, raise awareness with the next generation of what's possible, that this doesn't have to be a controversial subject. This is about just advancing things forward. And I know from my experience, when you look out at the we're in a very hard situation. You can understand how many years ago people died doing this journey, and still today, this is a perilous journey to take. And being able to do this with only renewable energy is quite a feat, and something that I think, as Robert has said, really shows that we do have the technology to continue to advance ourselves forward. Humanity is incredibly resilient, and we can do this if we begin to all be conscious of it. It wasn't that long ago. I'm just old enough to remember my parents thinking that recycling was one of the craziest things that anyone could possibly waste their time doing, but nobody thinks that way at all anymore. And if we can begin to think about ways that we're utilizing energy, and if by doing it through raising awareness is the way to go, then we want to be a part of it, and that's why Commvault's a big part of this. The data on the mission, from the equipment that we're using, from all of the things we're bringing back, is really key. I was actually, one of the crazy things I'm doing, Chris, on this journey is sometimes you get to listen to some music as you're going, and I've got my audiobook, and I'm listening to Shackleton, the Endeavor, I think it's called.
Yes.
And the part that I heard yesterday, he was talking about when he set off on the last journey and left some of the team behind in order to set out on a voyage to try to find help. He left instructions for all of the footage, all of the notes, all of the information that they had gathered and the scientific information they had gathered along the journey, for what was to be done with it. And even 100 years ago plus, the information that you gather on journeys like this is so critical to raise awareness around the world. And I think that's what the overall spec team has been doing, and we're truly honored to be a part of it. Really, it's we recognize the need for data to be protected. That people are doing remarkable things around the world now with data, and protecting it, making sure that it's available when people need it, and also being able to use it is the key.
And so I'm curious, Chris, A, what kind of data are you folks capturing out there? And B, how are you capturing it in these kind of horrible or challenging conditions?
Well, I think you can think of the data almost as information. It ranges from as Robert said, it's the equipment that's being utilized, it's the images, the audio, the video, it's sort of the drone footage. All the things that are being captured here range from things that can just be as simple as the photographs and such, but also then the equipment. And it's being captured in a few different ways. The one way is being transmitted back via the satellite phones and satellite technology, and then the second piece is sort of an old school sort of carrier pigeon almost. It's leaving things at certain points along the way so that it can be brought back to Punta Arenas in Chile. We've been really proud, and part of Commvault's partnership with the 2041 Foundation is we have a managed services team that's working with Robert's organization, utilizing the Commvault data platform. We're taking all of this data, and with our partner Microsoft, we're putting it into the Microsoft cloud in Chile. And one of the reasons we're doing that is just from a proximity standpoint. Even in Punta Arenas, it's not the easiest to get things from that city. I think it's the southernmost capital city in the world. In order to move things back and make sure that it's all protected. So we've been working with that to make sure the data is protected. And then there's also another piece of it, which is a product called Commvault Edge, which is a file sync and share product that enables Robert and his team to be able to ensure the data is there, but also can be accessed securely and can be shared around the world during this mission, but also after the mission. This is not just about this one mission for us. This is about an ongoing and sustainable partnership.
And how many folks are on this expedition, Chris?
So the spec group that went 570 miles roughly so far is 3 people. And then this group that has met them along the way is 7 more, including Robert and myself.
So you've got quite the posse.
Yeah, it is a pretty large group, and it's a fascinating group though. It's really it's made up of a lot of individuals. There's a doctor from the UK. There is a investment banker, I guess I would call him, who's interested in a lot of sustainable energy and ways that we can begin to drive investments in those areas. That's from Charleston. There's 2 folks from Shell that are also both from the UK. There's a doctor, recent graduate from Australia, that's on the mission here with us. So that makes up our team, and we sort of all come at this from very different directions and very different mindsets and skill sets. But it's been an incredibly great group. We were talking about how a lot of these groups usually have folks that have their individual missions, individual egos that come into this, and this has really been truly a lesson in leadership and teamwork and team dynamics. When you're putting up a tent and it's negative, I think one of the days it got to negative 30 and the wind chill, and you're putting up a tent in those conditions, you really your hands are freezing, your face is freezing. Frostbite is not a minor concern here. It's sort of a constant. Once you're outside, when you're inside the tent, It's amazing how warm it gets inside the tent. It actually gets really warm inside the tent at times, with the sun baking down on you 24 hours. But when you're out there, it's serious. You need to set up the tent, and that's a team activity. As you're getting things like that done, you need to pass water that's been, ice that's been melted and put in canteens. There's people running to different tents to give folks their water, so you can pour it into your dehydrated meal into the pouch for the night. So there's a lot of teamwork activities, but a great group of people.
Is it sort of giving you an even deepened experience of interdependence?
I think so. I think you really get when you wash everything away. Not to go too heavy deep in rail, but you really, as you're going along in the day to day on the skis, the first thing you realize is there's a guy in the front that is got the compass and is keeping you going in a straight line, hopefully, and in much of a straight direction as possible. And they rely on everything on a sunny day, from your shadows to the compass to GPS, to make sure that we're going on the right track. And you really are making sure that that person is keeping you moving in the right direction. Then you get to camp, and everyone has their roles to play and their jobs to play in camp. And it definitely has given me an appreciation for, you can look at a mission like this and think it's pretty straightforward, right? Where you're going to go from point A to point B, the South Pole. There's not too much complicated about that. And I've sort of looked at this from a business perspective and thought it's often very much the case in business that, you kind of know where you're trying to get to, you know where you are today. But it's very complex to get there at times. And here, there's a lot of complexity to this. There's a lot of medical things to be cognizant of. There's a lot of things from a standpoint of equipment to be very cognizant of. There's all of the aspects of individuals and individual welfare. You're constantly checking out your fellow team members to make sure they don't have skin exposed while they're on the march. You can get frostbite here pretty quickly. And we were talking to the doctor at base camp, and he mentioned that he's seeing a lot of frost injuries coming back to base camp after these missions. So it's something that we're trying to be extremely diligent about. As much as I joked with people that if I come back with 9 fingers, it's a good story, I still would actually like to come back with 10. So it's been amazing.
Toes too, for that matter, I would assume.
I'm sorry.
I said your toes, for that matter, too, in that kind of condition. Sometimes you can lose a pinky toe pretty quickly, can't you?
Yes, you certainly can. Yeah, and really, it's amazing. Your feet and your hands are. You go from extremely cold feet and hands to if you're out and you're pulling 100-pound sled over sand for an hour, suddenly your hands are sweating, your feet are sweating. So you really do have this constant battle. And then when you stop for 10 minutes for a break, the if your hands are sweating or your feet were sweating, they get icy cold pretty quickly. So that's why breaks have to be short and quick, and you have to keep yourself moving.
And this may be a naive question, but are you able to have a fire at night?
No, there's no fire at night. I actually, I think nobody wanted to put wood in their sled. I think that's
Yeah.
no, there's, what we end up using is only we have stoves. I guess there's probably about 4 stoves on the overall expedition. So we have 2 tents that melt water in the morning and at night, utilizing the biofuel. And then a lot of the solar panels get propped up inside and sort of in between layers in the tents at night to keep them out of the wind, but also able to charge some of the things overnight. And we'll wake up at different points in the night, which isn't too hard because you tend to wake up at different points all the time. And as the sun is rotating around you, you rotate the solar panels around you as well. So the sun here doesn't sort of go across the sky; it goes around the sky. So it stays at about one third up, I guess, from the horizon, and it just circles around you during the day. So you definitely, as you're out on the skis, you definitely notice your shadow moving around you.
That
as you're
must be
going.
a trippy experience for somebody who lives in North America.
It is. It's really wild. And Chris, one of the we were I guess it was about 2 or 3 days ago. It was extremely cloudy, and you couldn't tell the difference between the ground and the sky. And it is such a weird experience, and it's extremely difficult to navigate in those conditions because you lose a lot of the things that they can typically rely on. So they're only relying on looking down at a compass and doing their best. They can spot they spot a bump in the snow or the ice about 15 feet in front of them, and they ski to that, and then they try to find the next one. And it's sort of one piece at a time.
So
I asked the
is it the equivalent of skiing in
sorry,
a whiteout, but you don't know what's ground and what's sky? Is that how I should think of it?
almost if you look up to try to find the horizon, you can get a little disoriented and not quite fall over, but you lose whatever is that part of your brain that knows what's up and what's down. And the what you end up doing a lot of is just looking down at the tracks from the sled in front of you, and you just keep your skis moving forward. And the only good part about the cloudy days is it tends to be a little bit milder because the clouds put a blanket over the environment, and it keeps it a little bit warmer. When it's a beautiful sunny day, it tends to be windier and colder. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag.
Now, Chris, I know I've only got you guys for a very short period of time. You're busy, of course, and you're doing this on incredible technology, and I don't want to burn down your batteries too much. All that said, would love to have you back either one more time while you're still out, or certainly once the expedition's complete, if you guys are open to it. And with all that said,
Great. Well,
I'm just curious, is there anything else you want to share at this point of the expedition?
no, probably just best wishes for everyone back home, and we really appreciate Chris your time and ability to sort of help us spread the message and the word, and that's really what this overall thing is about. So appreciate your time, and thanks for the comment on the battery. I'm going to be taking this phone immediately outside and plugging it into one of the solar panels. We're probably out on our skis in about another 90 minutes, and we'll try to get a few things charged up in the meantime.
And on what date at this point, just remind me, are you anticipating actually being at the South Pole?
I think we'll get there on the 15th. So that's about another 4 days from now. Is the estimate 1, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 5 days. Counting today, it's 5 days. Yeah, about 4.5 days.
Well, gentlemen, I can't thank you enough for carving out this time and using your battery power to be with me. What you're doing is insanely inspiring, and thank you so much. And I can't wait to speak with you again soon. And I really wish you all the safety and security and blessings that I can wish you.
Great, thanks, Chris. Thanks so much, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Yes, yes.
Bye-bye.
Legendary, my friends. Woo-hoo-hoo-wee. Wow. Incredible. Absolutely mind-boggling. Incredible. Thank you, gentlemen, so much. And we sure hope we can have you back on Legends and Losers. If you loved this episode as much as I did, why don't you share it on social media with 20 million of your closest friends right now? Additionally, I'd like to tell you, we have a new mini book coming out. It's kind of like a giant white paper, and it's on personal category design. And really, it's been driving me crazy for several years now, all of this talk about personal branding. And personal branding in the absence of personal category design is complete BS, just like branding for a company without a category strategy is garbage. So if you want an advanced copy for free of this new mini book and see it before it is published on Amazon or anywhere else, here's what we'd like you to do. Write us a review on iTunes or Stitcher or YouTube or Podbeam or wherever you get your legendary podcasts. Take a screenshot of that review and email the screenshot of your review to blackhole@legendsandlosers.com, and we will send you an advanced draft copy of our new paper on personal category design and how you can catapult your career to a whole other level. All right. We would like to thank 2041.com, Robert Swan's organization committed to protecting Antarctica. Check them out at 2041.com. The folks at Commvault, hyperscale technology for data protection at commvault.com. HarperCollins Instant Classic, Play Bigger, How Pirates, Dreamers, and Innovators Create and Dominate Markets. Why don't you pick up a couple hundred copies today wherever you get legendary books. Equity Directory, connecting startups to the talent and resources they need to build a legendary business. Check us out at equitydirectory.co. OneLifeFullyLived.org, the nonprofit helping people dream, plan, and live your best life. Check us out, OneLifeFullyLived.org. The good people at DeVry University, making a difference since 1931. Check us out, devry.edu. The Flourishing Leadership Institute, the company founded by our good friend and guest, John Berghoff. They facilitate positive change with executive leadership and really throughout the company. Check them out at leadtoflourish.com. That's lead, the number 2, flourish.com. Our good friends at Island Angel Care in beautiful Maui in Hawaii, professional nannies certified in CPR and first aid, caring for your little angels on Maui. Check us out at islandangelcare.com. Habitat for Humanity, building new futures. Our good friends at Tahoe Truckee Homes. If you're interested in a home in Tahoe, either full-time or part-time, make your mountain dream come true. Check us out, TahoeTruckeeHomes.com. And the fantastic Millionaire Mindcast podcast with our friend and guest, Matty A. Check it out, Millionaire Mindcast. The fantastic book by our friend and multi-time guest, Dushka Zapata, A Spectacular Catastrophe and Other Things I Recommend. The legendary marketing leaders at Rapid Media in Australia. Check them out at rapidmedia.com.au. Got to remind you that today's information is provided to you solely for informational purposes, and this oddcast is the sole property of the Legends and Losers Oddcast Network, and we would love you just a little bit extra if you shared the shit out of it. We got to warn you, Legends and Losers is clearly produced in a studio that does contain nuts. Wear your safety goggles. Watch out for frostbite. Remember that objects and mirrors are likely behind you. Teach entrepreneurship. Go for a hike. Keep your eyes on the road and your hands upon the wheel. Listen to Tom Waits. Introduce 2 people you love to 2 podcasts you love. Be nice to your mom. And hey, go ahead, pee in your wetsuit. It's just fine. Thank you, Candy Dandy. Love you, Mom and Dad. And hey, Colin, this oddcast really ties the room together, doesn't it? Our apologies today go out to Martin Winterkorn, the fired CEO of Volkswagen who polluted our planet for decades. Sorry, Marty. We just ran out of time for you. That's it, my friends. Thank you so much for investing part of your life with us. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you again soon on another episode of Legends and Losers.